Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my final Boise State alumni in the NFL stat recap. This is for Week 17. 3 teams with Boise State players made it into the playoffs, but only 3 teams. That's going to put Jeremy McNichols, Billy Wynn, potentially if he comes off IR, and Charles Leno. But because of the limited number of players to review stat-wise going into the postseason, I'm not going to do that. It's really just 2 players to look up stats, and I'm pretty sure you guys can handle it yourselves. So that'd be like a 30-second video. So with that being said, this will be my final Boise State alumni in the Boise State alumni in the NFL stat recap. Until next season, of course, I am going to be putting out a series of videos after a head coach is announced at some point for Boise State, kind of going over Boise State 2020 season in review and what we're looking ahead at. And then here in the off season here, I'm going to try and find some things to talk about from time to time, potentially reviewing players for Boise State, or there's always stuff to talk about Boise State football, always things to come up with. So look ahead for those videos. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos, if you enjoy this content. The content will not be as frequent over the off season here, but I will be putting out occasional videos, and it will definitely pick up again when football season finally comes back around, there in September. So let's jump right into it. Minnesota Vikings running back Alexander Mattison. Now, he was almost the Boise State alumni of the week this week, and we'll explain who the other one is and why he was that once we get towards the end of the video here. But Alexander Mattison had an incredible game, final game of the season. Of course, Dalvin Cook out this game. He had personal issues with his family. Of course, unfortunate death of his father. Of course, all of our thoughts and prayers go out to him. But he was there with his family, of course, dealing with that. So Alexander Mattison got to take the lead here, starting for the Vikings. This week, he had 21 carries for 95 yards and a touchdown, long of 20. Adding to that, 3 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown, long of 28. That sets a new career total yards, career high for Alexander Mattison of 145 yards. He would have had his second 100-yard game. Of course, he had a previous 100-yard game this season against Seattle. He would have had his second 100-yard game if not for some unfortunate holding penalties throughout the game that kind of threw him off. He should have another 20 yards added on to that. The Vikings tried 3 jet sweeps to the right. 2 of them were called back on penalties. The last one called on 4th down on that final drive to kill the clock. Alexander Mattison ended up making without any penalties. And that, of course, I think ended up being like a 20-yard rumble or an 18-yard rumble or something like that. Anyhow, he should have gone over 100 yards in this game. Due to some offensive line work, he didn't, but it's still an incredible way for Alexander Mattison to finish the season, either to continue to cement himself in that Vikings backfield as a solid second-string backup, which was never in question, or potentially to catch the eyes of some of the teams out there. He has had a solid performance his rookie year, and especially this year. I think there was definitely improvement coming into this year, as there always is, to potentially catch the eyes of some other teams to maybe give him a shot at that starting role. So great way for Alexander Mattison to finish the season. Again, would have been the player of the week if not for another performance, which we will talk about at the end of the video because it just happens to be at the end of my list. So, Green Bay Packers, Billy Wynn, he still was on injured reserve. Packers aren't into the playoffs, and Billy Wynn went out about 3 weeks ago with that elbow injury. I believe. I'm questioning myself here because I didn't write it down. I'm trying to remember back from when I did talk about that about 3 weeks ago. I believe it was an elbow injury. Regardless, the main point is it wasn't major. They expected him to be out for 3 weeks. I'm sure it was an arm injury of some kind. Regardless, they expected him to be out for about 3 weeks, and they thought he might get him back at about the 3-week point. So we're at the 3-week point. So potentially he may be back for the playoffs. Again, there hasn't been any news at all out of his potential return. It's just going to kind of be week to week here, and he may be done for the season. But if he could get back, he would be one of those players to watch out for in the postseason as a potential contributor here for Green Bay. Jacksonville Jaguars linebacker Kamale Correa is no longer with the team, so we're going to continue on there. Dallas Cowboys wide receiver Cedric Wilson, he got involved again in the receiving game. First time he's caught a pass here in several weeks. Of course, last week he did attempt a pass. That was 2 weeks ago. So no stats for him last week, and 2 weeks ago he did attempt a pass. Anyhow, he got a reception this week for 3 yards. Hopefully, of course, as the Cowboys season comes to end here with their loss to end their season here, Hopefully, the Cowboys can continue to involve him in the passing game. Cedric Wilson really burst onto the scene this year, of course, with that incredible game where he went over 100 yards, and then he kind of dropped off in performance as Dak Prescott got injured, and then the subsequent quarterbacks, of course, ending Andy Dalton, didn't really know how to use him, kind of focusing with under a lot of pressure, ended up focusing on those key guys, of course, being Dalton and Gallup and everything else. Hopefully, Cedric Wilson, though, I think has proved his worth, especially as a gimmick player with an ability to pass as well for trick plays, but also a very smart player and talented player who knows how to get out and get open and be a regular part of the receiving core. Hopefully, he can work his way into that in the postseason here, or potentially catch the eyes of some other teams around the league. He definitely has that starting ability is basically what I'm saying. Defensive end Tyron Crawford, no stats in the season here. Defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence, again, had 4 tackles. He was what he had last week. He's had 4 tackles the last 3 weeks in a row. 1 sack, 1 tackle for a loss. Solid way for Marcus Lawrence to end the season, kind of being the heart and soul of that Dallas defense. Linebacker Leighton Vander Esch was still on IR, and hopefully he can completely heal up from all of his injuries. I mean, he had an ankle injury, which put him on IR, but then, of course, he's been dealing with that collarbone and the shoulder. So hopefully he'll be able to come back fully strong, fully healthy to have another incredible season next year. Safety Darian Thompson was unfortunately put on the COVID list, so he did not play. Of course, hoping that he gets back safely and soundly. Hopefully that there is no long-term effects from that, of course, and that he's able to get back into practicing and being part of this team. Of course, he really stepped up big here in the later part of the season with some injuries to other Dallas secondary, and of course had some big play numbers. He was our player of the week a few weeks ago when he had 6 tackles. I believe it was 6 tackles, but he was our player of the week a few weeks ago. Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver John Hightower finally back on the active roster after being a healthy scratch the last few weeks. He hadn't had any stats since December 6th versus Green Bay, so it was great to see him back out there again. But perhaps he has shown something in practice to put him back into the position to be part of that receiving core. He did only have the 1 reception, and it wasn't meant to be a reception, actually. It was meant to be a pass. A throwback trick play. He was supposed to throw the ball forward. Unfortunately, didn't see anything open. Did a nifty job of eluding tacklers in the backfield to end up getting a yard gain versus tackle for loss. So hopefully a very disappointing year for John Hightower, just dealing with a very deep backfield of wide receivers for Philadelphia, and also dealing with some issues, perhaps being as reliable in the receiving game. He had some drop issues coming in to the season here. He was involved in the deep passing game, but he was never really able to work into the short game, which is really what is going to make you a key part of a receiving core. So hopefully he can overcome those. Of course, a long off season to be able to work on those issues and to work on his ability to adjust to the pace of the NFL is going to really help him. Of course, he didn't receiving that this year because of all the COVID stuff, so he's really kind of cut short on that, given the short end of the straw on that. So hopefully he's able to come back strong for next season. Okay, Tennessee Titans running back Jerry McNichols, no stats for him. Good news for McNichols is that the player who has been challenging him for the backup role, D. Evans, also had no stats. McHenry took all the carries this game, completely hoarded them, and held on to all of them. He was just hoarding on to all the carries. So he had 250 yards rushing, an incredible game. Derek McHenry going over the 2,000-yard rushing point, becoming the only 8th player in the NFL to do that in the history, the modern history of the NFL. So incredible job for McHenry to do that, of course. Unfortunately, that left McNichols high and dry with no carries, but it has been great to see McNichols coming onto the active roster after spending so many seasons there on the practice squad. So hopefully he can have potentially cemented himself and again have a full off season to practice up and get back into the flow of things, and perhaps potentially come back next season again on that active roster or on another team's active roster. Atlanta Falcons defensive end Durant Miles, no stats. Denver quarterback Brett Rippon, no stats as expected. Hopefully again off-season prepare, either coming back as a second-string quarterback for Denver, which wouldn't be a bad gig. He's done a great job of that this year, or potentially catching the eyes of some other teams that are dealing with quarterback issues. San Francisco 49ers, quarterback Jamar Taylor is still on injury reserve. Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is the player. This is our player of the week. Linebacker Tanner Vallejo. Now, you will remember that he was our player of the week last week, if you watched that video. He was the player of the week last week with 3 tackles, which at the time was the first time he'd recorded any tackles since playing the Patriots in November, and it tied his season high, which he had recorded in October versus Seattle, giving fit to a slow week for the rest of the Boise players. 3 tackles doesn't seem like much, but it was a big mark for Tanner Vallejo, who had recorded no tackles for an extended period of time before that. Now, this week, though, he blew all of those stats out of the water. An incredible job for Tanner Vallejo. Incredible job. So, unfortunately for Arizona Cardinals, Jordan Hicks went out in the game early with an interception in the second quarter. Sorry, with an injury. He did have an interception, but he went out of the game with an injury in the second quarter, which then caused Tanner Vallejo to step into his place, and he had the game of his life, career high, 12 tackles and a sack. Amazing job for Tanner Vallejo. This is a player who's only had 54 tackles in his entire career in the NFL, which dates back to 2017, I believe, was the first time. 2020, 2019, 2020. Yeah, I believe 2017 was the first time that he ended up playing here. Anyhow, great job for Tanner Vallejo. So 54 tackles was what he had coming into this game total. On the year, he only has 14 tackles, and he had, in this game, 12 tackles. So 14 tackles coming into the game for the season, and in one game, he almost equals that with 12 tackles, passing his previous career high, which was 6 tackles in 2018 versus Atlanta. So outstanding job for Tanner Vallejo to end the season. He's hung around on the league, playing on being key parts of special teams and a backup role. So somehow, even though he's never cemented himself as a solid starter, he has had that grit, that determination that a team loves to have. He's one of those players that just light up the locker room. He's done a great job of coming in and playing a solid performance role as part of those different teams in the past. And hopefully, with a performance like this, 12 tackles, I mean, that is starter material right there. He's shown that he has the ability, he has the gumption. If not for the Arizona Cardinals, he's already played on multiple teams in his NFL career already. So if not for the Arizona Cardinals, potentially a team that needs some stiffening up there in their defense in their mid-defense area there with the linebackers. He has that starting ability, and this is a eye-catching performance to end the season. Great job for Tanner Vallejo. I wanted to give it to Alexander Mattison. I was going to give it to Alexander Mattison until I saw these stats. Great. I mean, if we were to do offensive player and defensive player alumni of the week, it would be offensive player Alexander Mattison, defensive player Tanner Vallejo. I just do the one player with the limited numbers of players in the NFL right now for Boise State. However, great job by Tanner Vallejo to end the season the way he did. I hope that he can come back strong for next season. So just to conclude, offensive linemen in the NFL, we have Ezra Cleveland still active with the Vikings, offensive tackle Charles Leno still active with the Bears, of course going into the playoffs here, and center Matt Paradis still active with the Panthers. So that wraps up my video, concludes all our stat look at the Boise State players in the NFL. Thank you for watching these videos. I've enjoyed doing all of the videos I've done so far for Boise State this year. Of course, it's the first year I'm doing them. I will hope that I can improve and get better coming into next season. And of course, make sure you like and subscribe. Keep an eye out for those videos. I am going to be posting pretty soon here. As soon as Boise State gets a head coach, I will start putting out those videos reviewing the 2020 season and looking ahead to next year. And of course, trying to find content that I can put out throughout the postseason here. So make sure you join Bronco Nation Updates. Make sure you join Bronco Nation Updates. We have over 8,000 members. It's a great place to root on your Boise State Broncos in all their sports, not just football and basketball, and all of the great swimming and diving and everything else that Boise State has to offer. Do we still have swimming? Or whatever's left after all the COVID slashing. Track and field. I think we still have track and field. But basketball, football, all the other great Boise State sports. It's a great place to root on your Boise State Broncos in that with over 8,000 fans. So thank you for watching these videos. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. And #cancel the CFP committee and go Big Blue.